Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and my journey around Fiji continues today with a flight from here in Nadi over to Suva, the capital city, and I'll be going inside that aircraft, the ATR-72, just behind me. So let's head over to the domestic terminal and I'll show you around. Here's the brand new international terminal, which everyone is very proud of, and I'll explore that in more detail in my A350 video. But now let's head next door into the smaller domestic terminal. It's pretty basic inside, but it does the trick. I had already picked up my boarding pass, so I went straight through to the departure lounge, which is more of a departure gate than what we usually think of when we hear the term airport lounge. Not to worry though, as they did have free Wi-Fi. And with that smooth segue, please check me out on Instagram and Facebook. After a short wait, we took off outside to board our aircraft, an ATR-72-600, which was delivered brand new to Fiji Link in 2014. I'll tell you more about the history of this aircraft shortly, but just quickly, let me explain the name. ATR was formed after a French and Italian companies agreed to work together, and translated into English stands for Regional Air Transport. The number 72 comes from the number of seats, and the -600 means that it's the latest model with uprated engines and avionics. On board, I was met with a friendly welcome, followed by a long walk to my seat 5A. The seats are all in a 2-2 layout, so you're never far from the great view outside. I'll show you around the seat in a little more detail, starting with the tray table in front of you, and under there is a small storage pouch. One thing I really like though is the overhead air vents, as I always enjoy a steady flow of air, especially when you're on the ground and it's quite humid. And of course, there's a pretty cool view of the Pratt & Whitney Canada turboprop engine next to you. While the legroom was fine for this short flight, this metal bar between my feet meant that I couldn't store my bag there, although fortunately the seat next to me was empty, so I could take their legroom. As the engine warms up, I'll tell you a little more about this aircraft. Back in the 1960s and 70s, everyone was focusing on jet engines, and propellers were considered old-fashioned. And while the jets were fast, they were thirsty, and when the 1973 fuel crisis hit, they obviously became very expensive. Unless the Boeing 727 or DC-9, for example, were full, they weren't profitable on regional routes with fluctuating levels of patronage. Therefore, cheaper turboprops started to make a lot more sense. De Havilland Canada built their -7, which was eventually updated into the successful -8, and here's one of those flying for Qantas in one of my other videos, and there's a link to that in the video description below. Europe wanted in on the action, so the two engineering and mechanical powerhouses, the French and Italians, signed a contract to build and design their own turboprop twin, and in 1984 the ATR-42 took to the air. Fiji also have a single 42-600 in their fleet, and I got footage of that in Suva, so you'll see that later in the video. As you can imagine, the number 42 was making reference to the number of seats, so the 72, which is what I flew on today, was simply a stretched version of that, built once the company were confident that their business model was working and they had enough orders. Over 1,400 of the ATR-42 and 72s have been built, and both remain in production. It's generated a good reputation as a safe and reliable regional transporter, and certainly on this brief trip, it was perfectly comfortable. I know some people do feel vulnerable on these smaller aircraft, although this was a great, smooth flight. Our 122-kilometre journey across Fiji's biggest island, Viti Levu, only took around 22 minutes with a cruising altitude of around 9,000 feet. The views from our window were pretty spectacular, and they got even better as we descended down into Suva, which you'll see shortly. One particular thing I really liked on board was that instead of offering water to everyone, they simply walk along the aisle and only serve a cup of water if you want it. This saves people unnecessarily taking those little bottles, which we all know are actually too small to be useful when you're hiking around somewhere warm like Fiji, and they all end up in landfill anyway. There weren't any other snacks provided, although again, it's a 20-minute flight, so that wasn't really a problem. As we descend down into Suva, I'll quickly mention my other videos on board Fiji's brand new A350, an A330 and a Viking Twin Otter that you may be interested in, and I'll link to those in the video description below. There's literally over 100 videos on my channel, including on board the A380s, 747s and older museum aircraft including Concorde, Comets, 707s and even the first ever jumbo jet. So I'd be really flattered if you checked out my channel. Overall, this was a perfectly pleasant flight and a reasonable alternative to the 3.5-hour drive from Nadi to Suva. It was actually my first ever flight on the ATR-72, so that was also a novelty for this little avgeek, and the views out of the window only added to my excitement. The crew were friendly, as I've come to expect in Fiji, and we arrived on time in Suva.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, welcome to Suva International Airport. For your safety, please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop. The fasten seatbelt sign is switched.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. I'll finish up with some more cool views of the aircraft as we deplaned and of the baggage carousel. While it's probably not much fun when it rains, I do love the views and sounds and smells when you get to walk off the plane directly onto the airport apron. Here's the shorter and original version of my aircraft today, the ATR-72, leaving on another flight as I waited for my return flight to Suva. And that flight was on board a Twin Otter, which you may also find interesting, and I'll include a link below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you another time.